So now you've successfully built your web application and you are looking for a way to deploy it online smoothly and fast. Well, in this video, we are going to take a deep dive into deploying a full stack web application on AWS using GitOps and Kubernetes. To make things practical, I will be using one of my weekend projects as an example. I will show you how I took it from development to a live scalable deployment, and you can apply the same to your own projects. Let's kick things off with a quick demo with the deployed app in action. I have hosted my application on the domain name Rent Right Away. So when you come to the application, you can basically register or create or log into an account. So basically I can log into my account with the user credentials. Once logged in, you'll be presented with a dashboard where you can also add property, and then you can also edit a property. You also have the possibility to add tenant and also manage payment and also send email reminders as well. So basically you can do all the CRUD operations that you would expect in any modern web application. Now, before we dive into the infrastructure setup, there is one more thing we need to take care of first: your domain name. I recommend grabbing one from Namecheap. It is super affordable and easy to use. I already bought mine for this demo. Next, we will head over to AWS to configure your account and update your domain settings so it uses AWS nameservers. This is an essential step to make because it ensures that your app is reachable under your custom domain name. So now go to AWS and log into your account. Once you've logged into your account, you'll be greeted with a dashboard, and then you can navigate to, you can search for Route 53. This is where we are going to configure the DNS for our domain name. So go to hosted zones and then let us create a new hosted zone. So my domain name I bought was rightaway.com. Then I'll give it a description: rental application. Now it should be a public hosted zone. So you create your hosted zone. Once you've created your hosted zone, you will get this NS record that you need to configure inside your domain name registrar. So I will copy this once and go to my domain name registrar. So find my domain. So if you are also using Namecheap, you can just find your domain name and then click on manage domain. When you see manage domain, look for the tab that is called name servers. You need to change the name server so that it is pointing to AWS. So go to name servers and select custom DNS and then put the custom DNS that we have from AWS. So now that I have copied and pasted all the name server, I just have to save it here. So now our name server should be pointing to AWS now. Open your command line to test this out. Run the following command to test it out. Now we can verify that our domain name is being pointing to AWS name servers. Now let us go back to AWS and configure SSL certificate for our domain name. Go to Certificate Manager on AWS and then request a new SSL certificate. It should be a public SSL certificate. Click on Next, and then the domain name that we want to get the SSL certificate for. So I will get it for rentrightaway.com. And then I'll also get one for all the subdomains, so all.rentrightaway.com, rightaway.com. So basically every subdomain that will come before our domain name will also use this SSL certificate. So we have to say DNS validation, and then we choose the encryption key, then click on request. It does take some time, so once it is done, you will see pending validation. So we need to create the CNAME in our Route 53. So just click on create records for Route 53, and then click on create records. So now when you go to Route 53, we should see this CNAME records being created for us automatically. So Route 53, and then go to DNS management, select the one we just created, and then now we can see we have the CNAME record that we just created. Once the CNAME record has been created, we can go back to the certificate manager and see if the certificate has been issued. Now we can see the certificate has been issued. This can take between 5 minutes to 48 hours, so we just need to be patient for it to be issued. Alright, now that the certificate has been issued, let us start deploying our application using GitHub Actions. Fire up your VS Code and create a folder inside your project called .github. Once you create that folder, also create another folder called workflows, because GitHub Actions expect a workflow folder also inside a GitHub folder. And then inside the workflows, then now we can create a file called cicd.yaml file. Inside the cicd YAML file, let us now give a name to our GitHub Actions. So name, and then rent right away CI/CD pipeline. Next, we will tell it on which branch we should run this GitHub workflow. So on the main branch, whenever we push code to the main GitHub repo, we are going to trigger this CI/CD pipeline. We would also need an environmental variable for our CI/CD pipeline. So let us configure the environmental variable for our CI/CD pipeline. So we will just say env, and then we are going to create an S3 bucket. We also need AWS region. We also need AWS access key ID. Once again, we also need AWS secret key. We also need the security group ID, as well as we are going to need an SSH private key. We will also need AWS ECR registry as well as repo, and then we will also use your AWS EC2 instance IP address. We shall be configuring all of this inside a GitHub secret. So go to your GitHub project. I'll minimize it, and then I'll go to my project on GitHub. Click on settings. Once you click on settings, come down to secrets and variables. Click on actions. When you click on actions, then you can create a new secret. So I've already created my secret, but I'll show you how to create a secret. When you click on create a new repository secret, click on it. And then you can put the secret name here. So what is the first secret that we should create? I'll go back to my code, and then it's S3 bucket. So we are going to create the S3 bucket. Come here and then paste it here. So once you paste it here, now we need the value for your S3 bucket. Go to AWS and create an S3 bucket. So once you are on AWS, search for S3 and then click on create S3 bucket. So you can give a bucket name as you wish. So code janitor test, and then you can basically go down and click on create bucket. Once you create the bucket, you can copy the bucket name and then go back to your GitHub Actions and then put it here. So you can just basically save it. I've already done it, so it won't allow me to do it, so but I'm sure yours will work. So now the next value we need to create for is the AWS region and access key ID. So minimize it, go to AWS, and then we need the region. So click here. When you click on this section, you should see your region that you are creating your resources in. So I am doing mine in US East 1. So whichever region that you are creating your resource in. Just copy it as the value and then go to your GitHub Actions again and create a new secret for it. Click on add secret and then you create the secret. The next value we do need is also called access key ID. So with the access key ID, we need an IAM user on AWS. So go to AWS again, and then when you go to AWS, go to create a user. When you go to create a user, give the user a name. So I will say code janitor tester, and then I want to provide a console access. I want to create a new IAM user. I want to use a custom password, give it a custom password, and then I want to go to next. Next, we need to attach policies to it. So you can go over here and look for administrator access. So select administrator access and then go to next. So when you go to next, you can basically just create the IAM user by clicking on the button create user. So once you are done, you go back to the users, and then you can see the user that you created. So I created mine 7 minutes ago. So you will just click on the code janitor tester. Once we click here, we need something called a secret key. So click on this secret key. When you click on this button, I want to say, okay, I want to communicate with AWS resources programmatically using the command line interface. So I'm going to select command line interface. And then I want to say I understand, and then click on next. Once you click on next, you can basically give it a description, or you just create your access keys. So once the key is created, we just need to copy this access key and then go back to our GitHub Actions, and then we need to say secret access key, and then put the value here, add the secret, go back to AWS again, copy the secret access key. Please remember not to share this, because there are bots on the internet that will scan your GitHub repo for these keys, and then they can literally do anything they want with your AWS account. So kindly be careful with that. So going back to the GitHub Actions, again, we will create one for AWS key ID, and then we will put the value here. So basically now we are done with creating the access keys. The next values we need to create is we need the security group ID, and we also need SSH key. All right, so go back to AWS and look for EC2 instance, and then we can click on instances, launch an instance, and then give the instance a name. So code janitor web server. I'll select Ubuntu instance. You can select any web server you want, and then I will go down, and then I'll select the instance type. I'm going to select remember to select the free tier. If you are new to AWS, you will have eligible for 1 year. So the next thing we need to do is also to create a key pair. So if you already don't have a key pair, you can basically create one as so. Give the key pair a name, so tester, and then you select the encryption key. And then if you are using any Linux system, remember to select a .pem file, and if you are using Windows, kindly select the PuTTY file. And then when you click on create, this will create the .pem file for you. So by default, AWS is going to create a default security group for you. But if you already have one, you can just go here and just select your security group ID. So I will just let AWS create one for us, and then I will move on. So now just click on launch your instance. This will take a couple of seconds and it will launch your web server for you. Go to the instances, and then you should see your EC2 instance running soon. Now it is running. Click on your instance, then go to the security. When you go to security, this is the security group ID that we need for our GitHub Actions. So go back to your GitHub Actions, and then the next value we need to say is AWS security group ID, SG ID. So put the value here, and then just add it. Once you do that, we also need the next value, which is going to be the private key. So we need the private key. That is the key perm we just downloaded from AWS. So open your terminal. I will open my terminal, and then I will locate to the file where my key perm file was downloaded. So cd downloads ls allow. Okay, so we can see the tester.perm file is here. So now we need to just run some few Linux commands. So just run cat and then put the file name here. This is going to give you the value, the content of the file. So this is the content that we need for our private key. So make sure you copy it just as I'm doing. Copy the whole thing, and then go back to your GitHub Actions again, paste it here, and then save the file. So once you are done, what is the next thing we need to do? The next thing we need to do is also to create an ECR repository, and then we need also the instance IP. So before the ECR repository, let us just do the one for the instance IP. So on the GitHub, just also paste the instance IP, and then go to AWS and get the EC2 instance IP. So go to AWS instance, and then we need the instance IP. So we need the public IP for your instance. So copy it, and then go to your GitHub Actions, and then just paste it here. Save it, and then moving on, we need the ECR repository. So the next value that we need is the Elastic Container repository. So you can create a new repository by clicking on create repository, and then just give the repository a name. And then once done, just click on create. This will create a repository for you. So when you get the repository, this is going to be your repository URL. Copy it, and go back to the GitHub Actions again. Let's paste it in the value here. And then what is the next value that we need? The next value that we need is the ECR registry. So we need the registry and the repo. So I'll minimize this, go back to my GitHub Actions, paste it here, the ECR registry. The registry should only be without the name. So we will copy this name and cut it out, and then we will save it. The next value also we need is the ECR repo. So we will just say ECR repo, and then we also remove this value here and paste in the name here, and then we will just save it as well. Now let us see what else do we need to create. So now our environment variables has been configured. So now we can move on with our CI/CD pipeline. So every GitHub Actions needs the name, and then you need to also tell it on which branch it should work. And then I prefer to set the environment variables like this. And then the next thing we need to do is also to give it the jobs. So now you can tell it how many jobs that we want to run. So in every GitHub CI/CD pipeline, you can run as many jobs as you want based on your needs. So in this project, we are going to run one job that is going to copy our Kubernetes files onto our web server, and then from our web server we can just deploy it automatically, which will be for the CD part. So in every job, there's going to be multiple steps that we need to do. So first of all, we need to give the job a name. So this job is going to be called prepare Kubernetes files. So the name is going to be called prepare Kubernetes files, and then we are going to say it's going to run on Ubuntu latest. The first step that we need this job to have is to check out the source code. So the first step is to check out the source code, so that we will have all this source code ready for the GitHub Actions. So once the source code has been checked out, we also need to configure the AWS CLI for the Ubuntu server, because you just have to imagine every action or every GitHub job that it will run, it is going to be like a web server that is going to be run on. So on that web server, we need to make sure we've configured AWS CLI, so that from that web server we can communicate with AWS resources as we would have done on our local machine. And again, remember, in my other videos I have gone into details how we do this on our local machine. So it's just that now we are just taking everything and taking it onto the cloud. So the next job is going to be set up AWS CLI. So we are going to use AWS CLI, and then we will just configure it with the secret key ID and also with the secret key. Those are the secrets that we just configured on our GitHub repository. We also set the region. Once that is done, the next step that we need to do is to configure the SSH file so that we can use it to log into our web server. So we can basically use these lines to make an SSH file so that we can use it to log into our web server. So now, before we get ahead of ourselves, let us now try and test our workflow out if it will work. So I'll open a new terminal. Okay, open a new terminal, and then I will push my code to GitHub to run our GitHub Actions. So git add git commit. I'll give a better commit name, deployment, and then git push. Okay, so now let us now go to GitHub and see if our GitHub Actions is running. So go to GitHub. So wait for it. It takes some time, so wait for it. I'll keep refreshing until I see something changes. Okay, so now we can see the deployment is here. The deployment action is here, and it is now running. Let us now open it and see. Now we can see it's preparing the KHS file that the job that we just created. So now it is running. Let us hope now and see it will pass. Hopefully it will pass. Okay, so now everything passed, and then we can see that our GitHub action was successful. So now we can go on and finish off our deployment file. The next job we need to create now is we need to get the GitHub container IP so that we can whitelist it in our security group, so we can SSH from our GitHub container into our web server, and then we can make some configuration onto the web server. So to get the IP, when you go to GitHub Marketplace, you can find GitHub Actions that people have already pre-built or created for you that you can just use in your deployment file. So come to the file again. The next job that we are going to create is going to get the instance IP for the running container of GitHub. So I will name it GitHub Actions IP, and then we will give it an ID, and then we are going to use the actions from HeyTerm. So HeyTerm has created a public action that we can use, so this will help us fetch the IP. Now let us now whitelist the GitHub job actions IP. So we'll give it a name. This job's name is going to be whitelist GitHub Actions IP. Okay, so basically we are just going to use the EC2 authorize security group command to basically update our security group, so that GitHub Actions IP will be updated on our security group, and then we can use that IP to SSH into our web server. Without that, we are not able to SSH into our web server. So now let us now copy the Kubernetes files onto the web server, so that with few commands we can just deploy our applications. So we will use this command to just basically copy the Kubernetes folder onto the web server, and then from there we can just run some few commands and deploy the applications. So first of all, we will just give it the name as usual, and then we will also run some few commands over here to copy the files onto the web server. Now it is a good idea to also, after copying the files and also whitelisting the IP, we also need to revoke the IP address from the security group so that our web server does not become vulnerable. So we will just run these following commands to also remove the IP address from our security group. So basically, we are going to say we will give it a name as always, and then we also give it an ID, and then we also use the command always to ensure that whenever this job runs, even after a job fails, it should also remove the IP address from the security group. So what is this going to do? This is just basically going to revoke the IP address by just running these few commands to revoke it. So now our first part of the job has been completed. We've been able to configure the environment variables and also create a job to prepare our web server to deploy our web applications. The next thing we need to do is we need to run a couple of more jobs. We need one job to also deploy the client-side application, and also we need one job to deploy the the backend application as well. So it's just going to be the same steps, and I'm just going to copy and paste some code, and then I will just come back here and then I will explain it to you again. So now we are back after copy and paste some code. The next job that we need to create is to build and push the backend image to the ECR repository on AWS. So first of all, we are going to tell it that it should only run after the first job has been completed, and then we will also give it a name, and we also use Ubuntu latest as we already did on the previous job. Over here, we are just going to set the working directory. So we are telling our GitHub Actions that this job is going to be run only using the backend folder. So it will only run using the backend folder. And now we are going to also check out the source code again. And now we are also going to build and push the ECR image. So we can build and push the ECR image by using some actions that are already available on GitHub Marketplace that you can use. So we are using this one from Appleboy. So the actions from Appleboy requires the access key ID and also requires the secret key. So that's why we had to configure these environment variables so that we can use it in our project. Always remember to use secret so that you can secure your applications. And we also need to give the registry name like we already did in our environmental variables. We also did it for the repo, and then we are also setting the region as well. Now we can tag the images. So whenever GitHub Actions run, it's going to give you an action run number. So we are going to use that run number to tag our images. So this image is going to be tagged called rent right away backend, and then whichever action number that we got, it will use that. So let's say we are running the first job, so it will be rent right away backend -1. So that will be the first version of our application. So the more you deploy, the more versions you get for your applications. So the next thing we need to do is just to set the daemon off, and then we also need to specify the Docker image file. So the Docker image file is located inside the backend folder. So when you go inside the backend, then you can see the Docker image file. So remember, in my previous videos, I've already showed you how to build Docker images, how to build custom Docker images in a Fullstack application already. So if you haven't seen that video, I recommend you seeing that, and then you can be up to speed with this one. Also, we will set the context to the backend, and then again we are going to tell it to build using this Linux AMD 64 platform for us, and then we also specify the volume, and then again we also get the IP of the action runner, and then we also whitelist the IP again, and then again we are also going to configure the SSH file. And now over here we just need to SSH into our web server. So when we SSH into the web server, we are basically going to edit the image with the tag of our GitHub runner. So we will first of all get the tag over here, and then we will save it in a variable, and then whenever we SSH into the web server, we will just use customize to edit the image that we built. Now the next step we need to do is to revoke the security group so that we don't render our web server vulnerable. So we will use the same old command to remove the security group. And again, we also need to build one for the client side, which is going to be the same as we have done for the backend. So it's just the same. We also tell it that this job should only run after the KHS file has been uploaded onto the web server. And then we also set the working directory as well. And then now the steps is also to check out the source code. And then again, we are using Apple Boy to also deploy the image to ECR repository. And now we also get the IP for our GitHub runner. And then we also again whitelist the IP. We SSH into the IP, and we do the same as we just did for the backend with the tag. And then we also revoke again. And then the last step we need to do inside this job is we need to SSH into the web server and then just run a few commands to deploy our web application. In order for this job to run, first of all, we need to tell it that this job is going to depend on the build and publish the backend job, and then also the same for the client side, because this job is going to need the images to be pulled from AWS ECR repository. So in order to pull the images from AWS ECR repository, we also need the secret access key to be ready on our web server so that we can pull the images, because it is a private repo. So we need to make sure that we've logged in on the web server, and then we can pull the images. So but before that, the next step we will do is to give it a name, this job a name, and then we also tell it to run on Ubuntu latest. Again, we will configure the steps by first of all configuring the SSH file. Now get the IP of the GitHub running action again, and the next step is to also whitelist the GitHub IP. So when you whitelist the IP, now is to SSH into the web server. So when you SSH into the web server, the first command that we need to run is to create the namespaces by using kubectl to deploy the namespaces. So the next thing we need to do is to get the password to log into the ECR repository on our web server. So you will basically run these following commands to log in into our ECR repository on our web server. And we also do it for the namespace. It should be the backend namespace, and then we also do the same for the client side namespace as well. So the main thing we need to do over here to deploy our application is to move into the directory where we have our Kubernetes file. So when you go into that folder, we will basically run the following commands to just deploy our application. Now once that is done, we basically need to do to revoke the security group again, as we have already discussed. So now let us save the file and test it out. Now I'll open my terminal again, and then I'll say git add, and then git commit -m updated, then git push. Okay, so now let us now go to our browser and see if the job is being run. So I'll go to my browser. Then I'll go to the actions, so we can see the job is running here. So now let us see which jobs have been run. Okay, so the first job is completed, and then now, as we already said, for the deploy side to work, we need the backend and the client side to be ready before we can run this job. So that's why we use the need to tell it that it should depend on this. Okay, so now let's give it a moment to see this will work. So you just have to be patient, guys, because sometimes these jobs always take some time, so you just need to have patience. So if for any reason this doesn't work for you, kindly leave a comment, and then I will assist you as much as I can so that you can also set this up for your project. Now we can see the client side is also done, so now we are waiting for the deployment side to be also done as well. Okay, now you see it's SSH into the web server, and then now it revokes the security groups. So good job. Now our application should be deployed now, So let us give it a moment and go to the browser and try to open our application. So I will open it, rentrideaway.com. Let's give it a moment. It will take some time before it will show up. So good job. If you've been able to made it this far, it means that you've done a great job up to this point. So now let us go to the browser and see if we can test it out. So rentrideaway.com. Now we can see we can still reach our application. So we just need to ensure that we can configure it on AWS. So go to AWS and then log into your account. Once login, we need to go to Route 53 and then go to the hosted zone that we already created. So go to hosted zone, and now we need something called we need to create an A record that will point to our server, our web server. So let us create an A record. So A record. Okay, we are going to expose CloudFront rent right away, and then we will expose it to the web server IP address. So how do we get the web server IP address? So go to EC2, go to the instance, and then copy the public IP address. Once you copy it, go back to the Route 53, and then we go to the hosted zones, and then we can just do the modification. So create a hosted zone for the whole domain, and then we point it to this IP address. Should be an A record, and we just need to give it a name here. So we need to use this subdomain called CloudFront rent right away. We are going to use CloudFront so we can expose our application over HTTPS. I'll copy this and then I'll create it. Okay, so now we can see we've created our subdomain called our subdomain called CloudFront rent right away the domain name. So copy the whole URL here and then go to CloudFront. Now let us create a new CloudFront distribution for our application. So choose the origin, so it is going to come from this origin, and then we are going to say the application is being served over HTTP. Don't do anything with the origin part. Enter the domain name for this origin. Okay. So don't do anything with that. Okay, the next thing we need to do is to redirect HTTP to HTTPS, and then we'll move on to the next part. Don't do anything here. So the next thing, no firewall. So we do not allow this. It's gonna be expensive when you allow it, but you can do it for much more security. So AWS will help you protect your application. Okay. The next thing we need to do is to give alternate domain CNAME. So first of all, let us add more domain name that we want to reach our application from. So I want to say rentrideaway.com. I want it to be reached on this domain name. Add it. Okay, only one. Just want to do this for now. And then we also need the SSL certificate. So that's why we had to configure the SSL certificate before. So we need to use the SSL certificate that we configured. And then now so we are done. We don't need to do more configuration. Just basically create the distribution. Okay, so the certificate attached to your distribution covers. Okay, so basically the domain name that we want our application to be reached on, we do not have the SSL certificate for that. But if I go up, I can see I have spelled my domain name wrong. So remember to spell it correctly. So it is rent, not rent. rentrideaway.com. Let us try and create a distribution again. Okay, so now the distribution has been created successfully, and now we have to give it a moment, and then we can reach our application from this link. But in order for us to reach our application from rentrideaway.com, we need to now go back to the Route 53. So when we go back to the Route 53, we just go to the hosted zone that we just created again. Now we need an A record that will point to our CloudFront. So create an A record. Then we are going to expose our main domain, so we won't do anything with it. And then we need to turn on the alias, and then we need to select CloudFront. So look for CloudFront distribution. So when you see CloudFront distribution, we can see one for Rent Right Away. So we select that one, and then we can create an A record. Okay, so now we've created an A record for our domain. So hopefully when we visit rentrideaway.com, we should be able to see our application running. So rentrideaway.com. So now we can see our application running successfully. Okay, so that's good. Let us see if we go to HTTPS, what will happen. Now it will redirect us to the HTTPS. So good job. So congratulations on deploying your application from development to production. So using these steps that we've gone through, you'll be able to deploy your applications at a much faster rate, and you can also scale this application as much as you want. So if you want more in-depth tutorials on how to set up this using the Kubernetes, kindly remember to go down in the description where I've put the link where we've already discussed how we can use Kubernetes to deploy web applications onto our AWS web service. And I think this will be a good practical knowledge for you. So if you combine those videos and if you use this tutorial that we've gone through here, you should be able to design and deploy your own custom applications. So I will leave it here for now, and I will see you in the next one. But before you go, do not forget to subscribe and kindly leave your comments and let me know how bad I'm doing and how great I'm doing, because I still want to serve you better and give you the best of me.